So we've seen a lot of the major ideas of the Enlightenment, and now we want to see how those ideas spread, because we do see, these are pretty radical changes. We want to know how these ideas move throughout Europe and other parts of the Western world. There's a few kind of main methods and places that the Enlightenment spread. One was the development of the coffee house. Coffee was fairly new in Europe; it didn't get introduced until the 16th century, but pretty quickly became very popular. The biggest difference between coffee and other drinks that people were having, like wine or ale, was that it kept you awake, and that made sure people were talking. Also, coffee houses tended to be places where people of different classes would come. They were cheap, and they tend to be on outside of regular places where people meet, like universities or colleges. So people who were studying there would go to the coffee house, and then other people would come as well, and they would sit around and talk about ideas. And so the coffee house was a way that those ideas spread. You also have, among upper middle and nobility class, the salon. Basically, these are rooms in rich people's houses, or well-to-do people's houses, where they'd entertain. And it became commonplace for people in big cities to host these gatherings in their salons, where they would invite all their friends and give them a book and say, read this book and we'll come talk about it. And you go to the salon, and if your friend was well connected, they might even have the author of the book there. And that was a way for these ideas to spread among the bourgeoisie, or the middle class, as well as the upper class. You also had, the continuing of print to be very important. A guy named Denis Diderot in France took a lot of these Enlightenment ideas and other scientific ideas and basically summarized them and published them in this set of books he called the Encyclopedia. And it's similar to our modern encyclopedias, except it also included a lot of that critical thinking and criticism of society that we see with Enlightenment thinkers. And lots of Enlightenment thinkers subscribe to and publish works in Diderot's Encyclopedia. It was based on a subscription. You would publish it and then send it to people all over Europe. You can see on the map, a lot of these people are in France, but you're also looking at England and the Holy Roman Empire and Austria, as far away as Poland and Moscow. And we should note, on the other side of the Atlantic, in places like Philadelphia, in the British colonies. So one of these ways these ideas spread is also through print. We see the ideas actually come into play in the 18th century during this kind of monarchy we call Enlightened Despotism. We talked about the absolute monarchs. Well, some philosophers said that the best way to employ these new ideas is to get absolute monarchs on the side of the philosophers, on the side of reform and change. They already have absolute power. They're the ones best able to employ these new ideas. Two of the most important of these Enlightened despots were Frederick the Great of Prussia and Catherine the Great of Russia. Frederick we already talked about as an absolute monarch, but he also was an Enlightened despot. Under Frederick's Prussia, there was no actual state religion, which the idea was that lots of people could practice freely there, which really subscribes to that idea of Enlightenment freedom, like Voltaire. He tried to give more freedom to people in lower classes, although not too much, which is one of the limitations you see with Enlightened despots. Catherine the Great of Russia was a big fan of Voltaire. She invited him to come to Russia, although never took her up on it. They did frequently exchange letters. She also wanted to give more freedom to people. She created a scientific school in Russia to promote these new ideas. And she did actually at one point give some freedom to the serfs in Russia. The problem she had is later they said, well, we want more freedom. There was a revolt, and then she crushed the revolt and then revoked all their freedom. So basically the problem we have in Enlightened despotism is these monarchs are willing to use the new ideas only to the point it threatens their freedom, or threatens their power. Once their power is threatened, they revoke all those ideas. So later you'll see some criticism of Enlightened despots thinking, okay, we thought these guys would make all these changes, but really they just want to use the ideas of Enlightenment to empower themselves and become greater rulers, but not necessarily to give more freedom to people. And as we move later into ideas like revolutions, that's where you see in the Enlightenment push against